Kia ora and welcome to Michael and Deborah Have a Chat. Again, that's right. We've had more than one chat. And this week I wanted to talk about, kick off by talking about something that popped up on the end of the order paper. For people who don't meticulously follow parliamentary procedure, when the House starts every day, we have this, which is the order paper, and it sets out the legislation that'll be debated that day, and then the legislation below the line that will probably be debated at some other stage. And one of the other little things we have at the end are the notices of motion, and members can put these forward to be on the order paper. They generally don't get debated, but they're a way often of MPs acknowledging things that have happened in communities they're connected to or their electorates. Deborah Russell, Dr. Deborah Russell, you have one on the order paper today, and it says, Dr. Deborah Russell to move that this House congratulate Algorithmi Education Trust and E03 Elementary School on the opening of their new school building in New Lynn on the 12th of June 2019. So, you know, first off, hats off on being a good local MP who gets these things up on the order paper. But can you tell us why this is about, what this is about, and why you've put it on the order paper this week?
A couple of reasons. One is that I was allowed out of school last week to go up to New Lynn for a day when Parliament was sitting, to be at the opening of the E03 Elementary School, and that was a wonderful occasion. The Governor-General was there, and a whole lot of eminent people from the Muslim community were there to celebrate the opening of this school. And of course there was a horde of gorgeous kids, you know, just lovely kids aged from 5 through to 9. So I had always intended to put a notice of motion saying congratulations, because this is a really positive event in my electorate. And for you too, Michael. Lots of the people whose children are at that school come from the Mount Roskill electorate too, so it's really good. But look, the other thing was that there has really sadly been a bit of what I'd have to call hate speech around about this school. So we've had a person commenting on the news media that I think I didn't even see it, but just making some really nasty comments about the school and about Muslims in general, and I found that really horrible. So I sort of thought, well, I didn't want to go there and attack it straight back, because that's often not a very positive thing to do. But I also thought that putting a notice of motion on the order paper was a way of showing that actually in the highest institution in the country, we really support this school. Yeah. So it was being positive instead of being negative.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things coming out of this. What one is, and we'll get on to this, is actually kind of the rhetoric that some people are coming out with at the moment, particularly attaching to the Muslim community. But perhaps first, let's just talk about this, the way that in this case you've responded to it, because I think that very same day I was interested and a bit horrified that, and I think we're doing the thing, we're not naming the person here, that person ended up with a big slot on a prominent radio show that morning to spew his hateful, bigoted bile about the Muslim community. And I asked myself the question, what actually is the value of this? Does it just effectively give this person a bigger platform and help to encourage this kind of behaviour? And I think there's a really interesting question there for those of us who oppose those bigoted views. It's how do you best defeat them? And do you defeat them by kind of bringing them up onto an equal footing, giving them a platform and then engaging, or are there other and better ways of defeating them? And I guess what you're signalling here is you think maybe there are other and better ways.
Well, yes, I'm not sure that a head-on fight is worth it. People often say that the best response to offensive speech is more speech, better speech, and I think that is correct in some ways. It's probably not enough, but it is correct. That often the best thing to do is, instead of engaging with that kind of hate speech, is just to talk about something really positive, to really build someone up rather than tear them down. So, you know, where a particular community has been traduced, or where a particular language has been used in a vile way, I think the better thing to do is to go positive. Actually, as our leader does, of course, she says, well, let's just try to be positive here. So that's part of it. I do think, you know, just saying that the best way to meet bigoted and offensive speech is to deal with it is more speech showing how that language is wrong. I'm not convinced that's enough anymore. I think it's too easy for us to sit in our own little bubbles. So yeah.
one of the things I've been thinking about is that taking that approach effectively puts the focus onto the person who is engaging in the hateful dialogue, and it becomes about them and their worldview and their rhetoric, and you're responding to that, we're responding to that. What you're actually suggesting is about putting the communities who are under attack at the centre and providing a level of support and solidarity and elevating them, actually. Yes. And that, to me, in terms of a healthy discussion and an approach that might actually help to move attitudes and encourage a better and more supportive and inclusive community, is probably going to do a whole lot more than engaging in a high-minded debate with someone who's probably just going to drag you down to their level.
Yep, yeah. And actually that's one of the things I want to do with this order paper is I'll take some copies of it up to the school so they can see that, I guess, well, certainly me, but I know plenty of other people are really supportive of them and what they're doing. Yeah. Actually, just sort of going back to talking about the school a little bit more, because I think some people do have some odd views about it. To me, it was a school, it feels much like the Catholic schools that I went to as a child. So I went all the way through convent schools, and there we learned the standard New Zealand curriculum, and as well as that we had lessons in what we called Christian living, and we'd begin the day with a prayer.
Didn't do much good.
Thanks, Michael. We'd begin the day with a prayer, and every now and again a priest from the local parish would come and conduct a mass at the school. So it was religious, but it wasn't what's the word I want? It wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't. It was just a way of enabling us to be reared within our faith, so that we understood it, but we were also reared as members of the wider community too. And this, to me, is what this school felt like. And the children at this school, as well as learning the standard New Zealand curriculum, they will have lessons in Arabic and how to write it and how to speak it, and lessons in the Quran, and obviously like a Catholic school or any school of faith, they do begin lessons with a prayer sometimes, or with a surah from the Quran. It's just a way of sort of living and working and learning in your tradition.
Yeah.
It felt great, actually.
Yeah. And it kind of feels to me like, there's this part of the conversation around social cohesion that's come up particularly post-Christchurch has kind of been about trying to find that sweet spot between recognising that we're a diverse community and that we have people of different cultures and faiths and a suite of languages, and it's healthy and good that those people are able to retain those characteristics, while also recognising that there are certain things about the way that we live together that we hold in common.
Yeah.
And I've visited ICRA, its previous location about Roskilde. We're sorry to have lost it, but it's a school that operates in a New Zealand context, that teaches New Zealand curriculum, that behaves in an entirely appropriate way in every respect, and produces children who are confident New Zealand citizens, but does so in a framework in which they can also learn and practice their culture and faith. And it seems to me like that's quite a good example of how we kind of walk this journey and get to that sweet spot.
Something I loved during the ceremony I went up there for was the children sang in English and in Te Reo and in Arabic. And they spoke in English and Te Reo and in Arabic. The senior boys did an awesome haka. So it was a lovely, I don't want to use the words melding, but all the different strands of our culture were there sort of threaded together, and it was, it was beautiful. I loved it, and so there, it was a really positive experience. Yeah.
Well, look, just going back to, I guess, the less positive and the less sublime. One of the things that has been, I think, a little bit alarming to a number of us has been the way in which, after those awful attacks in Christchurch, I think a lot of us would have felt that the natural reaction of those people who perhaps have bigoted views might have been to reflect a little bit, might have been to put their heads down, at least if they hadn't changed their views or reflected, to be a bit quieter. I was at a presentation to the Auckland Council, the Ethnic People's Advisory Panel of Auckland Council, this morning, and alongside, just preceding me, was a presentation from Anjum Rahman from the Islamic Women's Council, known to both of us over many years. And one of the things that Anjum said that I've observed and heard as well is that actually, contrary to that, actually what's happened post-Christchurch is that a lot of these people have actually been emboldened. And actually there are people in communities, and Anjum, was able to speak to this from her own experience and the experience of her community, who have actually faced, on one hand, really beautiful solidarity and support from most New Zealanders, but have actually faced worse and more extreme kinds of vile abuse and prejudice from another small group who held those hardcore white supremacist, Islamophobic views. And what's alarmed me a little bit is the person we're not naming who spoke about this school, but also a number of others. We're not actually talking about fringe people here. There are a number of people who actually have pretty prominent public profiles who have basically said, here's a good opportunity for me. Here's an opportunity for me to make a name for myself, to tap into a certain base of whether it's voters or people who might give me money or come to my services or whatever.
That's it's worrying, isn't it? Because you would think that after that horrible massacre in Christchurch that we would actually reflect, as you said. I don't know how we stop it. Don't know how we stop people feeling emboldened. We do have hate speech legislation. There is a move to get rid of it at the moment. It's interesting though, because that hate speech legislation, it doesn't stop you saying what you like. You can still do that. What it does do though is, and if I understand it correctly, if you engage in speech or language that fairly directly incites violence, then that's prohibited speech. So, and we have, it worries me in some ways because I don't want to go around outlawing types of speech, but I do think that you shouldn't incite other people to violence. And that's the critical connection, that hate speech legislation. So, contra one of our parliamentary colleagues, you can still say what you like, but you just cannot go around inciting violence at the same time.
But I think I'm probably like you with this. I have quite a high bar in terms of what kind of speech might actually face criminal legal sanctions. Certainly speech that incites violence might do. There's a process looking at the broader set of hate speech provisions, and let's see what comes out of that. But one of the things is that you have the criminal law and the sanctions that might apply there. You might still have speech that comes in below that, but possibly that should still face some form of social sanction from decent and organised people as well. The law isn't the only thing.
That's right, and we've had some of the people who sort of claim that their free speech is being threatened because other people have criticised their language. Well, actually no. You can say what you like, and I will criticise you for it, and other people will as well. And that goes straight back to John Stuart Mill. All right, in his book on liberty, it's chapter 4.
Do you have it in your handbag this time?
It's down in my office. Okay. But one of the critical things there is that people, you can do what you like, but you might have to wear the social disapproval as well. So when people are complaining that their free speech is being curtailed because they're being criticised, well, no, it's not being curtailed. They were able to speak, and other people criticise them for that, and that's just normal. And the real worry is when the government stops you from speaking. So I think that's been quite important as well, as in terms of thinking about our hate speech legislation. It has to be a very, very high barrier before the government gets involved, but there is no barrier for the rest of us for criticising you for what you might say in your speech.
That's right. I guess the other thing I've been thinking about with this is that we have there's a relatively small number of people who I think abuse the freedom of speech that we enjoy and do use it to punch down, to create an atmosphere that is hateful towards certain groups. And I've got to say, from my interactions as an MP, someone who has a degree of status and some people come and talk to in confidence, there is no doubt to me that the Muslim community wears more of that than virtually any other community in our country. But there's also anti-Semitic speech out there. There's speech that's prejudicial to Māori, to beneficiaries, the rainbow community and others. The speech component of it is a small part of it, and kind of the way I feel is that there's a relatively small number of people with profile and capacity who can find platforms to engage in that. Some people have absolutely extreme, revolting views. The bloke who got jailed this week, Philip Arps, for doing awful things with the video of the massacre. But actually the main work is actually getting through to maybe the the next 5% of people down who aren't quite there,
Yeah.
but are maybe on a journey towards that,
Yep.
and maybe have been brought up in an environment or been involved in an institution where prejudice is quite common,
Yep.
and who perhaps engage in speech which is sort of at the lower end, social media content which is unhealthy but not yet at the sort of the violent end.
Yep.
And actually it's getting through to those people,
Yes.
and actually bringing them over. And one thing sticks in my mind, and it's immediately from after the Christchurch massacre, and that was in the week afterwards. A lot of the mosques had open days,
Yes.
which I just thought was incredible, because you would have totally understood if they'd just shut the doors, locked the gates. They opened up, and I spoke to person after person who came to those open days who said, I live 200 metres away, I've been here for 20 years, and I've never come in.
Yeah.
And you could sort of see the scales being lifted from eyes, and the recognition that actually, these people look a bit different, they speak a different language, the faith's a bit different, but they kind of go to a mosque like I go to a church.
Yep.
And
It's just people.
Yeah.
Just getting back to that, something I was thinking of is that, of course, you and I probably never ever face hate speech. We just don't. We're politicians, but we've kind of chosen that. And I've had the occasional threatening email sent to me, but nothing like what has been experienced by other people in our communities. To me, that gives us an even greater duty to speak out against it. All right, we're in a position of power, so we ought to be doing it. And particularly in this case, speaking out in respect of hate against our Muslim whānau, but also, as you said, other members of our whānau who don't have the platform that we have and don't have the social power that we have. So we have a higher duty there, or a greater duty.
we do.
Yeah.
We do. And I think it's about ultimately it's about the kind of society we want to create.
Yeah.
And I've said this a few times, but what happened in Christchurch has made me think about quite a lot of things.
Yeah.
And one of the other things I've been thinking about is that often the conversation around this is framed in quite a defensive way. We sort of, I feel like our values as a inclusive society are under attack from some of these people. But actually flip it round and think about the opportunity for New Zealand if we do this well.
Yeah.
And if we can create a genuinely inclusive multicultural society that draws on the talents and the ambitions and the qualities and the perspectives, the languages, all of that stuff from the different communities who have chosen to make New Zealand their home.
Yeah.
And Auckland's the fourth most multicultural city in the world now.
Yeah. How will we measure that? I don't know how, but
yeah.
but it is
it feels that way, right?
Yeah, sure does. Yeah.
And if we could make that work and ensure that those people were truly included and were doing what they want to do universally, which is to contribute to our country, then in 30, 40, 50 years' time, that is going to make this, I think, frankly, a richer place, a more interesting place, a place that's more connected with the world, the kind of place that I'll feel good about my kids growing up in.
Yeah.
And if we come back to our conversation last week about the living standards framework, because that sort of crude economic language is a store of human capital.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And so instead of just the negative, that's a positive if we do this well.
One of the things I've often reflected on is that sometimes having lots of diverse communities living alongside and with each other can create tensions, but that tension is really fertile. That's where our new ways of thinking come from. So I think we're blessed in the diversity in our country.
Yeah, and I think probably in both of our electorates
Yeah.
we see that there's actually a really
It's a real energy.
thriving civil society of groups and associations, sort of cultural and business groups and all sorts bubbling away, environmental, often coming out of the energy of those different community groups, settling, finding their way, linking up with others.
Yeah. And I think one of the best things we can do with our diverse groups is to stand alongside them and say, we're with you, we support you. And going right back, looping back, I mean, that's what this is about, standing alongside.
Well, I think that's a good orderly way to end where we began. So there we go. That's us for today, and we'll be back to chat again very soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Ka kite anō.